Hey guys, I'm Pastor Harper. I'm here with Pastor Rick, and this is our second week of The Pursuit. And we want to kind of talk about and again apply what Pastor Kivett talked about on Sunday in his sermon. So we're going to kind of dig into these couple of verses that we talked about, Ephesians 1 through 2 together.
Right, Harper. And like we did last week, and we're hoping that you're watching this with a group or with a couple of other friends, or maybe just with your family. And sometimes when you're in a group dynamic, you need that icebreaker. So we thought we'd supply another icebreaker. Last week we talked about the stale, crinkly fries that you enjoy so much. This week I thought about asking this question. So we're big movie fans in our home. We kind of have a regular family movie night where one of the members of the family gets to pick, and sometimes they always pick the same movie. We've seen The Sandlot over and over again and others. All right, so here's the question. What is the go-to movie? So if it's on television, maybe you won't find it, maybe you're not streaming it, but if it's on, you'll have it on, you'll watch it.
Yeah, man, that's a tough one. I really like A Few Good Men.
Okay.
I like that.
The Tom Cruise Marine.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I like it. I like the plot, and I like that kind of conspiracy type stuff where there's all that unknown and
okay.
So that I feel like that's a really good one.
Yeah, you totally went in a good direction there. You're like, oh, this is something that's deep of substance.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with, for me, it's probably The Goonies. So a cinematic classic with The Goonies. I remember because Goonies was popular when I was a kid because I'm very old. But when we'd play in the neighborhood with our friends, we'd play Goonies, and you had to pick a Goonie, and I was always Chunk. So if you've never seen Goonies,
I've never seen.
Now you'll watch Goonies and go, oh, I feel bad for Rick.
Yeah. I was born in '91. But why don't y'all take a moment and y'all talk about this as a group? All right, so y'all talked about your favorite movies, and now we're ready to kind of get into what we're talking about in Ephesians 1 through 2.
Now, Pastor Kivett this week spoke on focusing on the idea of our place in Christ, our identity in Christ as being saints. And as we spoke about this topic, or as Pastor Kivett spoke about this topic, the idea of that word saints is a pretty neat word. It's packed with a lot of meaning. The Greek word that Paul uses there to describe what a saint is, or to what we translate as saints, is the Greek word agios, which means holy ones. And that's a really neat kind of idea. It's a concept that gives you an adjective. It's a noun that has its adjective in it, that you are holy. And so that being the idea there is that we're declared holy. Right away, Paul says we, specifically the Ephesian Christians, but we by extension, we are declared to be holy. It's not something that we have to achieve. It's something that we are given by virtue of our faith in Christ. Now, the problem is and I know, we're not yet holy. We are still struggling with our sin nature. Martin Luther said we're at the same time a saint and a sinner. We're kind of half angel, half monster, that we live in this world we live in. But here's what's cool about this. God declares you to presently be what you will one day be in Christ's presence. You're not there yet, but he declares you to be that way right now. And that's a really powerful idea, so that God's declaration of us should be the loudest voice about us. And we've talked a little bit about this before, about our identity, who we are. And people in our world today struggle with who we are, what is our identity, where do we go to find what we are. So I thought we'd start with this question and let the listeners do the same question, is the idea of when we let God be our defining voice, how does that flesh out? So here's the idea. What are the competing voices that seek to define us and the reality around us? Lots of voices fighting for our attention to tell us who we are. Yeah. And so we thought we'd talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, and I think too, as we've talked some, we've taken the Enneagram, and maybe you have as well, but that helps speak to as well kind of what voices tend to stand out to you more, because it's kind of different with in those different relationships. But yeah, for me as a 3, that successful achiever, I'm all about winning instead of losing, but everything is very black and white, win lose for me. But then also it can lead to even kind of some trying to twist things so it looks like a win. We're trying to, that's where it can be unhealthy as a 3.
Yeah.
And so for me, as I hear voices, it's not necessarily all voices, but it's ones that have more power for me, ones that I appreciate, or ones that I want speaking into me. So if it's fellow pastors, if it's other leaders that I look to and look up to, I want that, especially spouse, like that's one, getting that voice. And so as I kind of feel those voices either being good or bad, that can definitely shape a lot.
Yeah. So you said you're Enneagram 3, the successful achiever. There's no unsuccessful achiever? That's always
apparently
fun.
not.
No. I'm an Enneagram 2, and it's I think what I always call it, it's the helper. What is that specifically what they say? It's like the super helper or whatever. But it's
your own.
Yeah, I'll make my own up. But it's the idea that I want to help out, I want to assist, so that, there's pride in that. Like if you say, oh, you really helped me, I can come off humble going, hey, I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
No, but I really fed off that. But I would also add to that the idea of some of the competing voices are for success in other relationships. So like you mentioned job, maybe ministry, it could be your family. As long as the marriage, everybody sees that the marriage is okay. Yeah. You want people to tell you, you are a good husband, or you're a good wife, or you're a good father or mother. So those are voices, that your identity is wrapped up in those things. Again, it could be your employment. And so that we have people who are, we can always do this. Who am I if I'm not this?
Right.
And so those are some competing voices. I mean, again, we mentioned social media, it's out there too, telling you this is this is how you find real identity, this is who you are. The Instagram filters, how many followers you have on Twitter, sometimes those things speak to our identity as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, listen, take some time right now. Think about this for yourself. Talk with those around you and talk about this. What voices are there that kind of typically help define your reality?
Well, Pastor Kivett shared with us a quote from this week's sermon from W.A. Criswell we'd like to read over again and kind of discuss. In that quote it says, the phrase "in Christ" meant to be girded and grounded in Him and in His faithfulness. As a vine is anchored to the bosom of the earth from which it has received its strength and life. And so the idea there is that this, our identity in Christ serves as an anchor to us, and it nourishes on like a root to the plant. And so we start thinking about how we could have negative roots that feed into our lives in very negative ways. So the question we'd like to ask now is, what relationships in your life are not overflowing from your identity in Christ?
Yeah, so as we understand our position and who we are in Christ, it changes how we view others. It changes, like we said, we don't allow those voices to impact us as much and impact our decisions ultimately, because we are founded and we're firm in our identity being in what Christ has done for us and as God sees us. And so when we see this, again, there are some relationships that are probably good, but there are definitely some that need improving. For me, again, as being a number 3, one of my things is I want others to believe that I'm maybe more successful than I really am, or better than I really am. And so for me, it's a little easier to be nice to people in a public setting, not because I'm naturally that nice or because I really want to be that nice, but more because of my pride of, I want others to think this about me. I want others to believe this to be true. And so from my pride aspect, I can easily do that. But then when I get home, when I'm around my wife, when I'm around my kids, something that's easy is I can kind of let that guard down. Suddenly I'm with people that know me a little bit more, and so that can be something where it's a little easier to snap or to be a little harsher, where I should show more grace and where I would show somebody else more grace. So why not showing that in my own family? So that would be something, something where we've seen that, or I've seen that even in my own relationships.
Mm-hmm. Not even being an Enneagram 3 like you, being an Enneagram 2, I think that's across the board. We want others to think better of us, so we kind of put that face out there. So I think that's a normal thing. All of us, I think, struggle with that. I think in my situation, in my life, there are moments where I'm looking to find identity in my ability. Maybe being that 2 is what leads to that. So for example, I want to be the helper. I want to be beneficial to other people. So that's where I can find my identity very quickly. I want to be a helper. We might have some people who they find their identity in their family. That's a place where I can really quickly find my identity there. I want people to think of me as a good husband and as a good father, when in reality Jill and the kids know that that's not always true, if rarely. So that becomes a issue where I'm not very not finding my identity in Christ, rather as I'm finding my identity in dad or honey, you know. Yeah. And so if I'm not careful, that's where I can kind of make my family my God. Yeah. And people make the worst gods. Yeah. I'm kind of reminded of fathers and mothers who maybe make their kids their gods, so that when their kids mess up, they take it as a personal attack on their parenting skills, and that's not always the case, because we were never meant to be one another's gods.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, honey.
Awkward.
So take a moment now. You may want to think about this before you talk about it, but think about what relationships there are that could drastically be improved and that need to be improved based on finding our identity in Christ.
All right, well, hopefully you've had this time now to discuss it with the group you're around, or maybe think about this on your own. So that takes us to this week's challenge. Last week we challenged you in two ways, because these are going to be and those were going to be challenges that are going to go all the way through our Ephesians study. We challenge you to memorize the book of Ephesians. And Harper and I are at different places on that, because at the time of this filming, it is the third day of our memorization. So I'm where I need to be, and Harper is the type 3 overachiever. So he's already a little ahead of us. So you should be by now have memorized verses 1 through 5. Also want to share, we as a family talked about this, because when Pastor Kivett mentioned that we're going to be memorizing this as a church, I could hear my kids sweating. And I knew that they were thinking, how are we going to memorize this whole book? So Jill and I decided to take each week one verse out of that section that they're supposed to memorize. And they're going to memorize that passage. So we get to pick the passage. So if you have children at home and you're thinking, how can they be involved? Maybe pick one passage that they can memorize. Now, if you want to be a type 3 and have your kids memorize everything, feel free to do that. Our second challenge we gave you was to journal through the book of Ephesians, and Pastor Kivett gave us some opportunities for that. You could purchase that ESV Ephesians journal off Amazon for like $5, I think he said that, or just get your own journal where you're writing as we go. Those are great things to be doing. This week's challenge, however, is a little different.
Yeah, so we want to encourage you as you watch this to share this with others, whether you feel comfortable enough maybe to have people in your home or meet in a small group of maybe 2 or 3 people. Maybe just talk about this with your family. But even if you want to do this kind of virtually, just text or call or FaceTime, whatever, video chat people, and talk about these answers together. And again, this is helping us grow deeper into what we're studying together through Ephesians on Sunday morning, all in efforts to help us pursuing life in Jesus together.
Well, thank you for joining us today on The Pursuit. We look forward to seeing you soon. As always, you can email us at info@salemandbaptistnow.org if you have any questions. And again, we look forward to seeing you.